Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are incredibly excited to have everyone here with us today at our webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about ways in which students and teachers can help everyone to succeed at Model UN. And I'm very excited to have all of you here with us today. I see people joining in now from all over the world, and I'm very excited to have everyone able to join us. And without further ado, I'm going to jump in and get us started. Today, we're going to be discussing 10 ways, 10 tips from award-winning Model UNers at the high school and college level on how to win at Model United Nations. And to start us off, I would love to get an idea of who's with us here today at this awesome webinar. We had over 500 people sign up to join us today from all over the world and a ton of awesome questions submitted in advance. And what I'd love to know is a little bit about all of you. So if you could please post in the chat your first name, where you're from, and about how many MUN conferences you've been to. And if you have any questions that you hope that we're going to answer tonight, please also feel free to drop those into the chat as well. And we'll give it a minute for people to start to introduce themselves. And in the meantime, I would love to share with all of you what you can expect over the course of the event this evening. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to be your host today. My name is Laura Beth Goldsmith, and I am the executive director at Best Delegate. And I have the awesome job of getting to work with all of our students, all of our teachers, a number of different school districts and governments around the world, and even the United Nations to set up sustainable student led Model United Nations programs. And I've been doing Model UN for over 15 years and have loved this activity and have learned and won many, many awards in Model UN, both as a high school student and as a college student. And now I love to teach Model UN to students, teachers, UN officers, and government officials around the world. So I'm very excited to be here today, but I'm even more excited to get to introduce you to all of our amazing panelists in just a little while. And in the meantime, I want to jump right in and tell you what to expect. And if you weren't able to introduce yourself in the chat, no problem at all. We'll be giving people the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A section, and we'll be utilizing those throughout the event as well. So what to expect? We are going to start off by giving everyone some resources. I saw we had a mix of students that were new to Model UN and really advanced students, and we've got some awesome resources that will help all of you to excel in Model UN. We're going to start by sharing a new cheat sheet to Model UN and an ambassador guide for advanced delegates that will help you to succeed at Model UN conferences. I'm also going to share with you 10 top tips on how to win awards in Model UN. And then you'll have the opportunity to meet our amazing panelists who will be answering your questions for the majority of the time here today. And they'll really help you to hone your Model UN skills and to take them to the next level with their expert tips that they have as well. And finally, you'll get a chance to preview some of the upcoming Model UN opportunities that are happening in the Best Delegate atmosphere as well as in the broader MUN community. And the first resource that I would like to share with everyone is the Model UN cheat sheet. So this is a brand new resource, and this will help you to prepare for conferences. I highly recommend that everyone downloads it. Our awesome marketing manager, Tony, is going to drop the link to this resource in the chat and now for everyone to see. And this resource has a lot of great things on it. It has key terms you should know when participating in an MUN conference. It has the flow of committee. It also has the opportunity to have motions, so you can see exactly what motions you might be able to make throughout the course of a conference. It also gives you the chance to track your own speeches, to prepare an opening speech, and to see a template of how to go about writing resolutions. So we've got a lot of awesome new cheat sheet resources for students and for teachers that you are welcome to check out that will help you as you get started and participate in Model UN. And I'm seeing in the chat that we have people with a variety of experience, some new students from Honduras and from Texas and from the US that have 0 or 1 MUN experience at conferences. And then we have other students students from all over the world, Florida, Ecuador, Jamaica, and elsewhere that have participated in many MUN conferences. So regardless of your background, a cheat sheet like this is a great thing to print out and help you use to prepare to attend a Model United Nations conference. And if you're a more advanced delegate, I also recommend checking out our Ambassador Guide for Advanced Delegates. And we'll also drop the link to this resource in the chat as well. This is great if you have MUN experience and really want to shine at an upcoming conference. It has a ton of tips to help you do that, many of which we'll be going over this evening as well. Now, I'm going to jump into 10 top tips on how to win awards in Model UN. And I'm going to do this in 10 minutes or less so that we can hand everything over to our amazing panelists. But if you have any questions about these tips that I'm sharing, please also drop those in the chat or the Q&A, and we will make sure to come back to those as well. So, my first tip is to remember that your chairs are MUNers, just like you. And they may be chairing for the first time, or they may have a ton of chairing experience. But no matter how many times they've chaired, it's really important to remember a couple of things. One, they want respect and they want things to go smoothly. They want this committee to be successful as much as you do. And they also want delegates that are appreciative. Normally, chairs spend a lot of time learning about the topic, writing the background guide, preparing for the simulation, and they want everyone to really enjoy it. So remember that your chair is also an MUNer and you want them to have a good time as well as you, and you want to treat them with respect. Sometimes your chair may be a fellow college student, if we have any college delegates that go to college conferences here. And sometimes they may be a college student for a middle school or a high school conference that you're attending. So, or a high school student for a middle school or high school conference that you're attending. So I think it's really important to remember that they are your peers, but they deserve a certain amount of respect that you should give to them as you're participating in that MUN conference. And ultimately, you're going to do better if you are treating your chair with kindness throughout the course of the conference. The next thing I want to share is to always brand yourself and your ideas. Sometimes GA, General Assembly committees, can be very large. A Model UN conference may range from a committee size of 10 students to a committee size of 400 students. And a 400 student committee may be a General Assembly committee, which would normally have 193 countries, times 2 if they have double delegations. So sometimes there's a ton of people in a room and it's hard for you to stand out well. And you want to make sure you brand yourself and your ideas. And the way that you can do that is to name your ideas, to name your block, and to name your resolution in creative ways that help you to shine in your committee and for the chair to be able to see the way in which that you are influencing and helping to make the flow of committee happen. So I often recommend being creative with this. We can have some of our panelists share later, but you want to have everyone remember your idea. And sometimes you can use really creative acronyms as a great way to help you stand out. The next tip, tip 3, always have good speech structure. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but we have an awesome video online on how to write an opening speech. And the most important thing is that you utilize hook, point, and action. And I'll have Tony drop it in the chat as well, a link to our video gallery. This video is there as well as others. And hook, point, action is basically the idea that you start with a hook. It's like you're fishing and you catch your hook. It's the thing that brings everyone's attention in. It might be a question, a quotation, a statistic, a story, something that briefly gets the audience's attention and makes them want to listen to you. After you use your hook, which should be pretty quick, normally 10 to 15 seconds max, you want to have your point. And this is really where you have one main idea that you're conveying in your speech with 2 or 3 supporting points. And finally, you need an action. And this should be a call to action. It's something you want the rest of the committee to do after hearing your speech. It may be voting in favor of a resolution if it's a speech right before then. It may be working with you during an unmoderated caucus to help get your ideas together into a block and ultimately into a resolution. But the most important thing to remember about the public speaking structure is you really do have a limited number of times that you get to speak in committee, and you want to use them really effectively. And that's where structure can help. When you plan your hook, your point, and your action, you're a lot more likely to convey your message really effectively in that short amount of time. The next thing that I also want to share is that you want to be stylish with your public speaking. And that doesn't just mean what you wear in committee, although it could help you stand out. It also means the way in which you deliver your speech, your tone, your speed, and your pace, as well as your volume. Those are all really important things that you want to think about. This photo here is a picture from an incredible speech that Emma Watson gave at the United Nations. And feel free to post in the chat if you remember what she's most famous for. But I would highly recommend that you check out her speech as well as many other really famous speeches, because the thing that is most important for her that was incredibly impressive with her speeches at the United Nations are the way in which she conveys a message and utilizes style to do so. And I see a number of people that have recognized her from Harry Potter, an incredible actress who knows how to utilize emotion and tone and pace and speed and all of these other elements of style to have a really effective speech. And if you want to work on your public speaking style, we also have an awesome video on public speaking style, on the way in which you appear and the way in which you sound, both of those two functions. And I would recommend checking that out to help you enhance your speaking, because it doesn't matter if you have the best things in the world to say, if you don't convey it in a way that people want to listen, it will be hard to get them to really want to hear and follow what you're communicating. So that's Emma Watson. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and she's also an incredible speaker. So feel free to check out that speech as well. Tip number 5, frame the debate. So, a lot of people have a lot of ideas that they want to share. And sometimes it gets all over the place when opening speeches are happening and throughout the course of a conference. And a really strong delegate knows how to frame the debate. If you were in a committee on climate change and the topic was something like desertification, and you were the delegate of Yemen, you might say something like, "It seems like the committee is in agreement that desertification and climate change related natural disasters are the most critical sub issues of this topic for our committee to address." And they may actually utilize something like a catchy name that brands them and brings people's attention in, something like, "Yemen would like to draw the committee's attention to the working paper Hot as Sana, where it details the issues of desertification and natural disasters, and we encourage the entire committee to come on board with these solutions and commit any additional resources you have related to these." So basically, what I'm trying to convey here is framing. Instead of adding more and more out there issues, sometimes a really effective speech brings the committee together to focus on a couple of key issues. Tip 6. It's really important to bring out the best in other delegates. And if you've been to any best delegate events before, you've definitely heard this saying because it's one of our mottos. We really believe that the best delegate brings out the best in other delegates. They're not just focusing on themselves, but they're helping to make the committee better for everyone. So chairs want to see people working together. They don't want to see people standing up on a chair and yelling at other delegates. They want to see collaboration. And when you have the opportunity to bring other people in, to open a conversation, open the circle, literally or figuratively, if you're in person or online, those are great ways to be a great delegate in committee. The next thing I want to share is it is important to write a strong resolution, and resolutions can be made stronger by ensuring that you have great ideas with a lot of detail, well formatted resolutions, and also realistic ideas. The chair has spent a lot of time researching the topic, and they are an expert in this topic. So it's definitely something that you'll want to watch for, is some of those ideas that are being contributed as well. Tip 8, don't correct the chair. If you need to, for certain circumstances regarding parliamentary procedure where it's really essential and in your favor, you can do it. But if not, it's generally not worth it. If correcting them gives you the ability to make the first speech when you haven't had the chance to speak in a long time, sure, maybe it's worth it then. But if a chair makes a small error, generally speaking, they may be nervous. They may not have done this 20 times, and you don't want to call them out on that too much, because again, that goes back to the importance of them also being human. Tip 9, Practice, practice, practice. The more you do Model UN, the better off you're going to be when you arrive at conferences. And a couple ways you can practice. You can do public speaking exercises, whether that's practice speeches or public speaking games with your team. You can do mini debates with other students, and you can also do full simulations to help you prepare. And on the Best Delegate website, we have a couple of full background guides that you can use with your committee. And I'll share, we have an awesome resource coming out probably next week that is a full mini simulation that you can do with your Model UN club. It will have the student cheat sheet, it will have a chairing cheat sheet, and it will also have background guides and placards for you to run mini simulations. So I'm going to have Tony share the link to the student resource page. It has a lot of resources on it already. And in about a week, we will have the full resources up for you to run your own mini simulations as well. And tip 10 is ask for feedback. The best way to continue to get better and better in Model UN is to get feedback from other people. And you can ask your teammates for feedback when you're doing a MUN simulation. You can ask the chair for feedback, and you can ask a Model UN mentor if you're attending any of Best Delegates programs, or if you have a mentor on your own team or elsewhere. So I highly encourage you to continue to take in the feedback that you're going to get and the ideas that you're going to get tonight from our amazing panelists. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our awesome panelists. And I've seen one question a couple times in the chat that I want to address. We will be recording this panel, and it will be on our YouTube, and we'll be sending it out via email. So if you have to drop early, or if you have other delegates at your club that are going to want to see this, don't worry, it will be on our Best Delegate YouTube channel and our MUN Institute YouTube channel for you to check out and learn more of these tips. Now, without further ado, we have 4 amazing panelists here today: Annabelle, Anish, Ellie, and Bella. And I'm going to have them go ahead and turn their cameras on, and I will stop sharing my screen and give each of them the opportunity to introduce themselves. And if you don't mind, our fabulous panelists will share their name, their school, their MUN experience, an award that they are particularly proud to have won in Model UN. So Bella, would you mind starting us off, please?
Yes, I would love to. Hi, everyone. My name is Bella. I'm a senior now at Boston University. I'm studying international relations, so very MUN adjacent. I have been doing Model UN since I started college. I had never done it before starting college, which I know is relatable to a lot of people starting high school. They come in, they've never done it, and they're so excited. So I've now done it for 4 years. I was previously a director on our team. I was a head delegate. Now I'm a president, so I've also served in leadership alongside being a delegate. I've competed in crisis committees, ECOSOCs, specialized GAs, any type that you can think of. And I think the award that I was most proud to win was probably my first. I did my first committee like 2 or 3 weeks after finding out what Model UN was. It was very overwhelming. I had never even done debate before. And so I felt really happy to know that the hard work that I put in had paid off. And to date, when I feel like I've worked really hard, that's still my favorite time to get an award. So yeah.
Thank you, Bella. Next up, Ellie.
Hi guys, my name is Ellie. I am a sophomore at American University, which is located in Washington, D.C. I've been doing Model UN since I was a freshman in high school, so that's about 6 years. I'm also really involved, as well as competing on our collegiate team with like conference preparation. I chair a lot, both with Best Delegate and with other organizations, including the National High School Model UN Conference. I love doing General Assembly, double delegation. General Assembly is kind of like my specialty in Model UN, but I've also done my fair amount of single del and crisis as well. And probably the award I'm most proud of is my first crisis gavel. As someone who primarily does General Assembly, that was a really exciting thing to win and to work for.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. Next up, Annabelle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annabelle, and I attend Western Albemarle High School in Crozet, Virginia. I've been doing Model UN for the past 4 years and have loved every bit of it. I'm currently on leadership at my high school. I served as a head delegate at our most recent conference, and I've just loved all of it. As for my favorite award, I would say my favorite award was a committee that it was a historical crisis on Caesar's assassination, and I was Cleopatra, and I just loved that committee. I was completely uninhibited, and I was just myself. And I think my favorite thing about that committee was that just had so much fun with it. It was by far my favorite conference.
Sounds like a lot of fun. I often find that when you're relaxed and enjoying, that's when you're most likely to excel at Model UN as well. Anish, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anish. I am a sophomore at Providence Day School in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I've been doing Model UN for 5 years now, since sixth grade. And I am unfortunately not on leadership. My school does things a little bit weird. But the award that I was probably most proud to win was, like Ellie, my first crisis gavel, which was the first committee I did after coming back from COVID. It was a Nixon Watergate committee. A ton of fun. And yeah, I was really proud to win that as a freshman in a high school committee as well. So I was pretty proud of that.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to jump into a number of questions that we have first about preparing for committees and standing out in conferences. Then we'll jump into some questions that we have around public speaking. Then we'll jump into a number of questions that we have about crisis. And finally, we'll jump into how to prepare for summer and next school year as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as well, and we will get to those, as well as questions that were asked in advance. So the first question that I want to jump right in with is from Aparna and Umadi. They both had a similar question. How do you research for the topic and answer questions during committee that you might not fully know the answer to as they're coming up? And also, how do you do it in an efficient way? Many of us are doing lots of activities at school and have lots of homework and everything else. How do you effectively research and prepare for a Model UN committee? And Ellie, would you like to start us off on that one?
Yeah, of course. So like anything when you do Model UN, research needs to be really purposeful. So it's very easy, especially in General Assembly, when you get a topic like desertification or climate change, think I have to research everything about this topic, my country's entire history, like everything we've ever done that's related to like climate change, our government, our economics. And that's not necessarily true. I like to call it purposeful research. And oftentimes it's solution-oriented research. So do some background research, make sure you have a good understanding of the topic, and especially read the background guides. Chairs can tell when you have not read the background guide. But then once you're done with that, spend more time on sort of researching possible solutions. So that's kind of where, in my opinion, good research starts.
Absolutely. Bella, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I have a specific technique that I really love, where I will start with, if I'm in a GA or a crisis, I'll start with my country or my position, and I'll find out a little bit about my country or position, and then go through and read the background guide. So I can do that with the context of knowing maybe how the topics discussed relate to my position or relate to my country. I agree with everything that Ellie said, and I think that that helps add just a tiny bit of context, and is really, really helpful when you then go back later and flesh things out past the background guide, to have already started a little bit with your position.
Absolutely. And we also have a great resource on the Best Delegate website that's how to prepare for MUN conferences in 2 hours or less. And I would say, depending upon how big the conference is, the amount of time that you're going to want to put in is going to vary. If you're doing a 1-day training or beginner or advanced conference, you may put in about 2 hours of preparation going into that. But if you're preparing for NISMUN or NAMUN or a really big national conference, you might spend a couple weeks doing work leading up to that. So I think in terms of how much research you should do, it may vary based on how big of a conference it is and how much preparation you personally need to feel confident and comfortable going into that. So definitely check out that resource as another way to get more comfortable. But I would say know the overall topic, know your country, and most importantly, focus on those solutions, because that's what's going to help you to succeed in that committee. The next question we have is a very common one. I saw it in our questions from Lynn and from Sophie both. They asked, how do you be a leader in a group full of leaders and skilled MUN delegates? How do you really stand out and win? And again, sometimes there may be 400 people in a room. How do you help you to stand out in a meaningful way in committee? Do we have a GA panelist who wants to help on that one? What are some of the best ways that we can really stand out in committee? Ellie, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I think what people forget about General Assembly sometimes, it's a lot about relationships and it's a lot about the people that you meet while you're competing. And what's super, super important, and I saw a question about this on the Q&A, someone said, like, what do we do before like committee even starts? It's super important that you stand out by building those relationships. So you might have delegates that are equally strong in the same block, but if you're a delegate who may have better relationships with everyone, that'll really help you when you're getting your ideas through a merger or doing Q&A or anything like that. So I can pass it off also to our high school panelists. I'm sure you guys have your more recent high school experience to talk about as well.
Annabelle, would you please share as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Ellie said. I would definitely say to be approachable but assertive at the same time. You want to come into committee with an agenda saying, this is what I want to do, but then you also want to listen to other people's ideas and you really want to make them feel welcome and feel like if they're ever struggling, you will be there to support them. A lot of people think they need to be this ultra competitive person in order to succeed, but really the best way for success is to be an approachable person for people to feel comfortable to talk to.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Another question that we have is, how do you win best delegate at every conference? That's something Hannah asked. And I think it really comes down to consistency. Anish, would you please tell us a little bit about how you could be consistent in Model UN?
Yeah, so first thing, I'm going to preface this by saying I've done a bunch of committees and I haven't won best delegate in all of them. And I am confident that any of the other panelists haven't won best delegate or even awarded in every conference that they've been to, because, you know, as you go up, the caliber of delegates that you encounter is really incredible and you get to see different strategies from different people. And I think that itself is really impressive. And so that's part of what I would recommend is, learn from the best, see what, whether that's the delegates that are winning best delegate or the delegates that you just admire in committee, see what they're doing and see how you can bring that into your own style. Another huge thing is just be yourself, because when you are being yourself, it's much easier for you to speak well and, show what you know. And when you're like trying to put on a fake persona, chairs can see right through that. So those are two of my biggest tips for, winning best delegate at every conference, even though, to be honest, your goal should mainly be just to have a good educational experience. And in my opinion, awards come second.
I definitely agree with that. And I think even if you are one of the best delegates, it does happen where sometimes you blank. You don't end up getting an award at that conference. For whatever reason, the chair didn't see it in you and they saw it in other delegates that day. And that is absolutely okay. So don't get discouraged if you haven't won an award or if you were winning awards and you don't at one conference. It absolutely happens. The most important thing is that you continue to learn and grow and enjoy your experience at Model UN and not just focus on the award itself, and you'll be much more likely to succeed in that way. The next question we got from Holden, and that was, winning best delegate means to bring out the best in other delegates. How can I do that? What are some examples of ways in which people you've seen bring out the best in other delegates? And Ellie, I'd love to start off with you. I know you've chaired many, many times. Can you share some examples of when you've seen people bring out the best in others?
Yeah, for sure. So my best example of this actually comes from when I was a delegate, and it's when I first attended NISMN. So for those of you who are maybe from like the New York area, you're a little bit more familiar with it. And we were in that first initial like unmod block. And I know for a lot of people it can be very stressful. And I was finding myself like really being talked over to by like larger personalities in the room and by other delegates. And this one delegate, a senior in high school at the time, I believe, who was representing India, stopped the conversation. He said, guys, stop. I think she has something to say. So kind of being almost like a hero to someone else and allowing them to get their voices heard and just to express themselves is something that I think is really undervalued in Model UN. It's something I look for as a chair now after that one experience. I remember coming back to Chair Nisman is looking for delegates who aren't necessarily drowning out someone in conversation, but are more sort of in that facilitation role that we talk about. So making sure everyone gets a chance to be heard and gets to speak. So for me, that's an example of like bringing out the best in others.
Absolutely. Bella, can you share any as well from sharing?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because Ellie took the perspective of a delegate, I can take the dais perspective. I think that's something that one of my very first dais members, I believe it was a chair, did that really helped bring out the best in everyone, is making sure that everyone knew that this space would be safe for them no matter what. So making sure to disclaim, like if anyone feels uncomfortable, that you can always come to me, and working really hard to ensure that the boundaries of respect were upheld in the committee. No one was speaking over each other. The debate wasn't getting too antagonistic. Obviously, it's Model UN, but people still need to respect each other. And so I think setting those standards, both as a dais member and as a delegate yourself, really helps bring out the best, because it makes sure that everyone can feel safe to be themselves, which, as we said earlier, is so, so important.
Absolutely. Another question on the note of feeling safe and feeling comfortable in the committee is sometimes the question of bias, whether it be gender or other biases that may come up. Coco asked, how do you overcome gender bias or other biases in committee? And Bella, I'd love for you to start us off with that. What are some tips that you have in order to make sure that this is a really safe and great environment in Model UN?
Yeah, it's definitely a very hard question to answer, because it is a real problem. I think that's something that I've benefited a lot from, is getting to know other female presenting delegates on the Model UN circuit and in my committee, and kind of building the solidarity with us, because when you get to know those people, they become kind of a comfortable space for you, and they make you feel more safe. For example, if you were to experience a form of gender-based discrimination or discrimination of any sort, they can help you feel a lot more comfortable reporting it to a secretariat member, or to your chair. I think that's another thing that I definitely took a long time to feel comfortable with, but is really, really important, is the secretariat and the chairs, and maybe a crisis director if you're in a crisis, exist to make the space safe. So if something happens that makes you feel uncomfortable, you are well within your right to say something about it. So something that has really helped me is like feeling empowered to say that, and feeling empowered to represent myself the best I can. And if people are assuming something about me based off of the way that I present, or being, discriminatory in any way, knowing that I have the people on my side to help me fight back against that, really, really helps.
Ellie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to challenge maybe some of the male presenting delegates who are listening in those conversations. Really challenge yourself in your biases when you're sort of confronted with female delegates, sort of reflecting on this happening in Model UN conferences. Because there's been a lot of times, I'm sure Bella can also attest to this, where I've been talked over to by male delegates, and their partner will be like, oh no, like he's the nicest guy. Like you would never expect him to like talk over other delegates. So I really challenge you guys when you're in Model UN to think about it as a competition, yes, but also as a space that we need to be respectful of everyone who's in there, regardless of like their gender or ethnicity or their cultural background.
Yeah, and I think Anish just posted something awesome in the chat too. We have a great new podcast, a Model UN podcast that's out that our co-founder Ryan Villanueva has been running, and there's a lot of awesome episodes on a lot of different topics in Model UN. And one of them with Felix was a great discussion about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in Model UN. So if this is a topic you're interested in, I highly recommend you check out the podcast. And there's a lot of other episodes about winning awards at Georgetown and other conferences. So definitely check out the podcast. It's a great way to keep learning more ways to excel beyond this webinar. And I'll also have Tony drop the link into the entire podcast Spotify so you can check all of those out as well. And the next question I would love to touch on, and I've seen this in the chat as well, is how can you influence committee if you're representing a small or less relevant country to the topic at hand? And I'd love to start off with Anish on this one. How can you really have an influence when you're a smaller or presumably less important country?
Yeah, so I've seen a couple of really great answers in the chat. And the go-to country that I always use, I think probably because they either were or are on the Security Council, is St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a really small Caribbean country. I believe they're Caribbean. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But they're a small country with very little influence. And so I think the biggest thing that you can do is hold firm to your own policy. And while St. Vincent and the Grenadines might not have a complete dossier about their stance on nuclear weapons, a lot of it you can find a lot through extrapolation. I like to think of it kind of like an English class. So you have the basic information, and I'm going off on a limb here. I'm not entirely sure if this is correct, but I believe St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a sponsor of the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. You can extrapolate that, maybe they aren't a huge fan of nukes, and so on and so forth. So using the evidence that you're given, however small that may be, to find like general trends in policy is a great way to do that.
Yeah. And I love the comments that are in the chat right now around making sure we're respectful of all countries, regardless of what country you represent. It's not worse or bad to be a specific country. It's only your perspective as you look at it. Sometimes I've represented a really small country and I've actually seen it as a huge advantage, because when you're doing awesome and you're a rock star as Vanuatu and you're in the same committee as people that may have a P5 country or a really important country, sometimes that actually stands out a lot to your chair as well. So remember that regardless of what country you are, there's real people in that country that really care about these issues. And also that the chair knows when you're representing a country that's hard to research and that's hard to represent. And they're paying attention to how you excel when you are one of those countries as well. So don't be discouraged if you are representing a smaller country or if you are representing a country that there's not a ton of research on. Do your best and the chair will be respectful of that fact as well. Annabelle, did you want to add anything else on that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that it's a common misconception that if you're this big country, you're at an advantage. But honestly, it can sometimes be a disadvantage to be a big country because a lot of the other delegates might look up to you to have this big idea coming into committee. And while you should have that big idea, it can put a lot of pressure on you as a delegate. So when you're representing a small country and you come in with these amazing solutions, that'll really stand out and that'll really prove yourself throughout committee.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One more question I want to touch on is, how do you make sure that you utilize and prepare your position paper effectively? And how do you prevent it from being too general? Would any of our panelists like to talk briefly about position papers? Not all conferences require them, but there's something that some conferences require in advance of the conference that has your country's, perception on the issues and some solutions that they have. So Anish, would you please touch on this question of how do you prevent position papers from being too vague?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing with position papers is writing a solution-oriented paper, because anyone can find like a quick Google search will reveal generally your country's position about the topic. And so from that, if you take a look at that and then you find solutions out of that, that's going to really make your position paper stand out. And there is a article on the Best Delegate website that covers that. Yeah, and I will go put that in the chat now.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think those were all great points. I'm going to move on from some of the questions about preparation to some of the questions about how you excel in committee, and specifically about public speaking. I've seen a number of questions in the chat, and we had one in advance submitted from Julia about how do I feel confident and not stumble over my words when I might be trying to give a speech in committee. And I'd love to, Bella, start us off on that one. How do you really make sure that you are comfortable when you might be nervous about that public speaking?
Yeah, this is something that so many people feel nervous about. It's a common thing in teaching at this point, like hundreds of people. Everyone is worried about it. And even people who they'll give a practice speech and it will be perfect. I'll ask, what do you want to improve on? And they'll say, I stumbled so much. you're like, I didn't hear you stumble. And I think that's the biggest thing is it's really a psychological thing that you have to train yourself to know, is you are your own worst critic. It's like a piece of feedback that people give, but it is so, so true. You are the only one that notices those things. But if you're thinking about it all the time, it's going to make it more likely that it does come out and you do end up stumbling, or even you give a speech that's great, but you feel like you stumbled because you're in that mindset. So I think the best thing to do, and I always tell myself this before every conference, even when it's not true, is I always say, like, I am the most researched, I am the most prepared I could be. I'm going to give the best speeches of my life. And I say that to myself. I say that to my teammates until it's true. So that is how I get over the psychological barrier. But in terms of actually putting together speeches that you feel comfortable delivering smoothly, the biggest advice that I give is to slow down. When you give a conversational, like when you're having a conversation, there's no punctuation, you just give it. But when you give a speech, you stop because you know where you want your periods to be and where they would be if you were reading off of a document. So I think that that's something that I really tell people a lot. It helps them slow down to think about where a sentence would naturally end. And then they have more time to think about their words. So they're not quite as rushed or as jumbled or as stressed about thinking about what the next word is because they have the time. So mentally, that's how I do it. And strategically, that's also how I do it.
Great point, Bella. I think we had a number of questions about opening speeches, but we also had some questions about authors panel specifically. And Daria asked, how can you prepare for the question and answer section of an authors panel? And for those of you who are new, after resolutions are drafted, there's an opportunity to present them. And typically what will happen is you'll get to read at least the operative clauses, which are the solutions within the draft resolution. And then there's a chance to answer questions from other delegates. And so Daria is really asking, how do you prepare to answer those questions during the authors panel? And Ellie, I'd love for you to start us off with some of your suggestions to really prepare for that.
Yeah, so the infamous authors panel, I think for a lot of people, it's the thing they're most stressed about coming in to a Model UN conference, especially General Assembly. I really quickly, before I get to the second part, there was someone who asked a question about Q&A versus presentation and which one's better. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer for high school and middle school Model UN. I think Bella would agree with me. Definitely collegiate chairs tend to prefer Q&A in terms of their awards procedure. But really, it's about showing the chair that you have a good working knowledge of the paper. So take it from the diocese perspective. There's sometimes 300 students that we have to evaluate throughout the weekend. And having someone on a Q&A panel or an authors panel makes it much easier for us to kind of narrow down who we're going to give an award to, just like numerically. And Q&A and answering the Q&A question really, really strong is a really great way to stand out to the chair. So my recommendation for you doing presentation is to not just read off your clauses and to kind of talk about your ideas, summarize them, summarize who worked on them, focus on your contributions. The chair wants to hear what you did on the paper. And for Q&A, make sure you're kind of letting the audience, letting the chair know your thought process behind writing these clauses, why they're on policy, why they're going to fix the problem, and most of all, why your contributions were super important to your block. You really want to focus on your work and what you've done on paper.
Absolutely. And Ellie, one key term you just used that we have a question on in the Q&A, what is a block? Can you explain what that term means for everyone?
Yeah, of course. So a block is kind of like I almost like call it your friend group during committee. Committee besties is also sometimes a phrase I will use. So it's the people that you work with. It's who you write your paper with. They're taken from the UN terms like geographic block, economic block, cultural block. The group of countries that you align with and your ideas are the most similar to.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. And anything else that our panel wants to add in on the authors panel process? I think the one other thing that I would just point out is that it's okay if you don't get the opportunity to present then. I know a lot of people get really stressed about whether or not they get to be a presenter. Depending upon the size of your committee, sometimes the chair notices when you do step back and let somebody else present that might not have otherwise had the opportunity. So it's great when you do get to step up there, share your ideas, defend your paper, but I wouldn't get into a screaming match about getting to be the one that gets to do it either, because that does not help you come off as diplomatic to your chair as well. Okay, another question that we have is I just want to hit one more time on we talked about stumbling, but about nerves. Anything else that our panel wants to share about helping you feel comfortable instead of anxious or nervous? And we had a number of delegates that asked this question. So Annabelle, would you please share any other tips you have on feeling comfortable in an MUN committee?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to this day, I still sometimes get a little nervous at the beginning of every conference, but I think of it as more, I'm just so excited that I am overwhelmed. I would say just remember that all of these delegates are people. And at the end of the day, the goal is to have fun. And you're going to make mistakes, and that's going to be fine. No one really cares about you because everyone's so focused on themselves that the times that you do make a mistake, no one will really notice. And when you and don't just don't think about the mistakes when you do make them, because there's nothing you can really do because they've already happened. I would say that, and then just also feel confident in yourself because you've done the research, you know what you want to do. Just go out there and be yourself, and everyone will love that.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned before, practice. There's nothing like having a good mentor and having them practice with you. I'll say Ellie and Bella are two amazing mentors that we have at Best Delegate that help run our weekly programs that mentor students and help them gain confidence leading into conferences. So whether it's with Best Delegate on at one of our workshops or at one of our weekly teams or our summer camps, or whether it's with your own team, practice and get advice. It will help you feel more comfortable and more confident. I did Model UN and speech and debate in high school, and we practice every week to help us feel comfortable and confident going into simulation. So I would definitely encourage that. And now I'm excited to turn over to the next brief segment on crisis committees. I'm a crisis delegate through and through. It was one of my favorite things. Instead of just representing a country, you may get to represent a country or a person in a fast paced simulation. And for crisis, it might be that you're in a historical committee that is looking at an issue of the past. It might be that you're in a fantasy committee that's looking at an issue that happened in a book or a movie. It might be that you are in the Security Council looking at a real problem that's happening today, or any other type of committee that exists within the realm of crisis. And I want to talk about how we can win and excel at crisis and some of the different ideas that we should focus on there. Carmen asked us the question, how can you get your crisis notes to have an impact on committee? And for those of you that don't know, in crisis, there's what happens in the room that everyone sees, and there's what's happening between your notes and between the staff that is running the crisis outside the room. So I'll start with Bella on this one. And Bella, if you can share just a little bit about how you can have influential crisis notes.
Yeah, I think that the thing that makes crisis notes influential every time is that they play into a major theme or hopefully multiple major themes in the crisis committee. There are lots of crisis updates that come in and impact committee that are really fun and are, something that's really changing the state of committee, but something that makes sure that your crisis notes can be impactful is that they are fundamentally interacting with something that is at the core of what the committee is about. So if the committee is about an international incident, maybe you're doing something to directly interact with one of the members of the international incident. Or if it's a board of directors, maybe you're building a rival company, like something that is at the core what the committee is supposed to be about, and not just something that's really fun. On the other hand, you also want something that's fun, that's going to be fun for the crisis staff to interact with, that's going to be fun for other delegates to interact with. So a mix of something that's on theme and really engaging and interesting or fun, I always find is a good, helpful tip.
Absolutely. And I'd have the more detail, the better. When I'm on the other end and I see somebody has this really well thought out plan and they give me the how they're going to do it, the why they're going to do it, they establish the relationship with the hypothetical person on the other side of the table that they're working with, it really makes me say, yeah. And if they are building it over time, the crisis notes are more likely to continue to build towards something exciting. Which brings me to a question that we get often, and we got from Caitlin at Idea Public Schools. She asked us, how do you develop the best crisis arc? And Annabelle, when you answer this question, I would love for you to also address what is a crisis arc. So for those of us that might be new to that term, they can get a better understanding of how do you develop one and what is it?
Yeah, so a crisis arc, think of it as this story that you're telling to your committee. So throughout committee, you're going to write these notes to this to this like group of people that aren't in your committee room, and they represent anyone you want to write a letter to that is not in your committee. And through these notes, you're going to ask for things, and you're going to also give people things, and you're going to use your resources to build up to this big thing that you want to impact committee. And this will tell your story of how you went from point A to point B to gain power. So to have that best crisis arc, the first thing that you need to do is do that research. You need to prepare. You need to look at your character and what resources they have and what beliefs they believe in that would best have an impact on committee, and how you can relate that to the topic at hand. And then from there, just brainstorm how you can make it fun, make it relevant, make it something that people in committee want to address, because then you're going to be the person that everyone's going to be talking about. Then from there, you just add on to it, make sure you have detail, and you want to make sure that as committee goes on, you stay relevant to what the topic is being discussed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Annabelle. And I think that the key point about crisis is continue to make it fun and engaging for the staff and for the people in the room, and realistic where possible, because that really helps you to excel as well. Another question that we got is about JCCs. Can you talk about a JCC, what it is, and how to excel in one? And I'll start with Anish on this one, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a JCC delegate through and through. I've done multiple. I love them. So what is a JCC? A JCC is when you have two crisis bodies interacting with each other. So you have your dynamics within the committee, you have your dynamics with with your crisis arc and your crisis notes with the back room, and you can also interact with another committee. And so these committees, they often take the form of like two sides of a conflict. So for example, the Watergate committee that I mentioned earlier, we had the Nixon's cabinet, and then we had the journalists. Or in another one I've done, we had the mafia families, and then the police. So they're always in conflict, and they're always trying to gain the advantage. They're trying to gain the advantage on top of each other. And so the biggest thing with JCCs for me is being really fluid. Know your position really well, and know, are you a hardcore believer in whatever your whatever your side is, or are you more of a middle kind of you could go either way. So that's a big thing. And then don't be afraid to meet with other people in the other committee, because that's a really good way to tie both committees together and get yourself noticed by both chairs and the crisis staff. So those are my two biggest tips.
Awesome tips. Another kind of committee we had a question about was fictitious committees or fantasy committees. Isabel asked, how can we have a good solution if we're in a fictitious committee? Ellie, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I love a good fantasy committee. My very first high school single bell experience was in a Harry Potter committee. So I totally understand the question, if we're simulating the UN, why, how do we come up with ideas for fictional committees? And I would challenge you to think about the same way in terms of research and solutions that you would a regular committee. There's the same amount of research out there if you're doing Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Star Wars. And oftentimes it's way easier to be creative and think about those really creative and fun solutions. The creativity that you bring into a normal crisis committee, you can do the exact same with a fantasy committee. And General Assembly also does this as well. A very popular one is a futuristic committee. So they'll say the 2030s or 2040 or 2050, or I've even seen one for space in the year 3000. So really try to think about, how do I bring that creativity and that research, those fundamental skills that I've learned, into this sort of new environment. And most people just have fun because they're super fun.
Absolutely. All right, now we only have a little bit of time left. I want to do a speed round of all the questions that are in the chat because we've gotten some great questions in the Q&A in the chat, and I want to make sure we get to as many of those as possible. So panelists, please try to keep your answers very, very short and sweet. I want to get through as many of these as we can. So the first question is, how do you show appreciation for your chair? How do you show appreciation for your chair? Bella, would you please go for that?
Treat them with respect, but also treat them like a normal person. Say thank you when they do something that you appreciate. Say thank you for feedback, and never try and take up more of their time than you know they have, because they will really appreciate it.
And have fun. They've spent a lot of time on this. Have fun. That's one great way to show appreciation. Next question. How do you deal with a double delegation situation where one partner might be stronger than another? Ellie.
Maximize what you're both good at. Maybe you have one partner who's a stronger writer, one partner who's a stronger speaker. Make sure you guys are doing what you enjoy and what you're better at. And if you have maybe a delegate who is a little bit of a weaker speaker, make sure they can do more of those prepared speeches. So the opening speech, a question for Q&A, being on Q&A, something they can prepare for a little bit more.
Great ideas. Next question. What's the best way to create a great name for a resolution? Anish.
Honestly, just looking at, the main topics that are being covered and seeing if you can find acronyms for those, or, if there's anything that's like really funny. I know there was one in the slides about the as hot as a sauna. So stuff like that, things that'll make the chair laugh.
Awesome. Next question. What do you do if you're stuck in the middle of a speech? Cameron B asked. Ellie.
Public speaking is like riding a bike. Even once you learn how to do it, sometimes you fall off or you have a stumble. Take a moment, pause, you have plenty of time, recollect your thoughts, and start speaking again.
Awesome. And remember, it happens to everyone. It's okay if it happens to you. Nobody will judge you for it in the long run. Next question. Does hook point action apply to all our speeches or just opening speech? Annabelle.
Definitely try to do it for all of them. Definitely prioritize your opening speech because it's your first impression, but make sure that you have that engaging structure and that's organized in all of your speeches.
Absolutely. Another question that I see in the chat is, how do you get information on a country where it may be harder to find info? How do you research in that scenario? Ellie.
So Best Delegate has this really helpful resource called the country map, which has a map of all the different countries in the world, and it will take you right to the CIA World Factbook website, their country website, as well as their website in the United Nations. So I would start there, use that as a starting platform, and then start branching off from there once you have basic research done.
Absolutely. We also got a question on how to prepare for crisis. Any other tips on preparing for crisis? We have a guide to crisis, and we could drop the link for that as well. And we also run programs to help you learn how to be a crisis delegate. So those are 2 tips. And the biggest thing I would say is just practice and do it. Next question that I want to address is, what do you do if someone asks something and you don't know the answer? Yeah, Anish.
That happens a lot. And, because especially in crisis where things are so fluid, but also in a GA, you can't research everything. So the best thing is just to be honest, just acknowledge that you didn't know that, be gracious, thank them for the information, and then move on.
Awesome. Another question is, do you have any tips for coming up with good solutions? Any tips for coming up with solutions to problems? Yeah, Bella.
Look at interesting things that your country is doing to deal with the problem and see if you can make it bigger or you can change a certain element. And if you can't find something that your country is doing, maybe you have a smaller country or they're not directly related to the issue. I like to look at pilot programs or experimental things. New technologies are always really cool solutions, or maybe things that have been done before. And I think about how I can improve it and make it more updated for the current problem.
Awesome. We also got a number of questions on how can I continue to get better at Model UN? And specifically, Jessica asked, what is the Virtual MUN Institute? And I'd love to turn that one over to Anish and then to Ellie.
Yeah, so I've been on the Virtual Model UN Institute, both from the student side and the crisis staffer chairing side. And so basically what happens is you have a 5-day virtual committee from, I want to say 12 to 4 or something like that Eastern time. So you get a bunch of personalized feedback with, expert chairs and really engaging crisis staff. And you can learn strategies, whether you're a beginner delegate learning about parliamentary procedure or an advanced delegate learning learning about crisis or some of the more like harder strategies to master. And it's a really great experience, and I would 100% recommend it.
Awesome. Ellie, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, so Bella and I both had the awesome opportunity to staff the Muni over the summer. It is such an awesome program. It is so accessible if you live somewhere that doesn't really have a great or a strong Model UN program. It's an amazing way to get more involved. Definitely want to plug what Anish mentioned in terms of the different levels. So if you're ranging anywhere from an elementary student who's just stepping into Model UN, if you're a senior in high school and you really want to have a more intensive program, kind of a last hurrah before you graduate high school Model UN, it is a great program to join, and it is so fun. I know, I love it. Yeah.
Thanks, Ellie. And we also got some questions from advisors on, is there a course or a way to learn MUN? The answer is yes. Check out the Advisor Institute. We'll drop the link in the chat. It's a 3-day program for advisors and teachers to learn how to do MUN. And since we've gotten a number of great questions on resources and upcoming opportunities, I want to go ahead and share a few of those. If you are looking for a Model UN conference coming up, we've got a lot of great virtual conferences, February 11th, March 4th, and April 15th. We still have space at all of these conferences. We have training conferences and we have advanced conferences happening each of these days. And I know many of the awesome people on this panel are chairing at these conferences as well. So definitely consider joining a Best Delegate conference as well as conferences in your own area. There's also Model UN workshops. So if you're new to Model UN, we run a 3-hour workshop that helps you understand how to write resolutions, how to give great opening speeches, and how to understand and excel with Model UN procedure. Great way to get more comfortable and confident to speak and excel at conferences. So I'd recommend checking that out. And we also have Model UN teams. If you really want to spend time with peers that love Model UN and global issues, we meet weekly online. From February 7th to April 25th, there are 12 sessions and 2 conferences that you can attend. And the deadline to sign up is this coming Sunday. So if you're interested in joining a team, please do check that out as well if you want to join us in the school year. And again, if you're interested in joining in the summer, like Ellie mentioned, we have programs for high school students, middle school students, and elementary students of all experience levels, whether you're a beginner looking to learn, an advanced student looking to win awards, someone wanting to do crisis and excel at crisis committees, or a student leader, we have a program for you to help you excel in Model UN. And if you want to come in person, we offer MUN Institute summer camps on the campuses of Georgetown, Columbia, Boston University, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and UC Irvine. And it's a really fun and engaging way to meet other MUNers and have a fabulous time while learning and excelling. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, whether they're general MUN questions or questions about one of our programs. You can give us a call. You can email us at support@bestdelegate. You can engage with us on our social media, or you can schedule a call with one of our mentors. And I truly want to thank our amazing panelists who joined us here today, who have a ton of valuable expertise that they shared with all of you. And I want to thank all of you who joined live today or who are watching this recording after the fact. I hope that you learned a lot about Model UN in this last hour and in our speed round on Model UN expertise and skills. And truly, I appreciate that you do Model UN. I can't wait to see how all of you continue to excel in Model UN and make the world a better place because you care about these real global issues. And with that, we are at time for today. If anyone has any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us on our social media or via email. This recording will be available online in just a few days, and we hope that everyone has a great evening. Thank you so much from all of us at Best Delegate.